Greetings, everyone. Welcome to CRWS book study on Bobby E. Wright, The Psychopathic Racial Personality, and Other Essays. The date is February 26, 2025, and white people are still in charge. We are continuing with our study, starting from the chapter. Chapter 3, essentially, the title is A Psychological Theory of Educating the Black Child. So, this chapter is Dr. Bobby Wright's explaining what exactly occurs in the white supremacist structures known as school, the educational system, and how, due to like a long history of racism, from like Darwinism to many other white supremacist so-called doctors and psychologists, the way schools teach students is inherently incorrect, and unless you fit a very specific mold to receive that type of schooling, it's very easy to get left behind or to be labeled as a person with a learning disability, or a person who needs or a person who is not intelligent as well. So he speaks of he called it modality predilects, which is how a person experiences something, and a preference of how we can or want to experience something like that, and how the schools teach us in a manner that basically focuses on one aspect of learning, which is let me see if I can find it. Which aspect of actually, I'm definitely jumping the shark, because I'm jumping way ahead. First, we need to understand why this is even important. So this is from page 22, and this is a term I don't know if we've covered in this study yet, but it's a term that we've definitely studied before in this book club. So we're discussing here what occurs in schools. This is very, very important information. What occurs in school, 21st, what occurs outside of school as well, just what the system does to black people worldwide, is a term coined by Dr. Bobby Wright, menticide. And this is he states here, today the education of black children is one of the most volatile issues in the United States, politically, socially, and economically. One of the most positive dynamics of the black liberation movement has been black independent school development. At an accelerating rate, black parents are removing their children from the debilitating menticiding from the term menticide, which I define as the deliberate and systematic destruction of a person's or people group's mind. Hold on, I was not reading. I was going from memory. I'm gonna actually read the definition, which I define as the deliberate and systematic destruction of a person or group's mind. So basically, retarding one's ability to think correctly, to think logically, just to be what a mind should be, like something, a creative force, a constructive force. It just removes that ability and just makes a person's mind pretty worthless. Is how I would describe it. Public schools and placing them in black national. So he's this is continuing from him saying that the Black Liberation Movement, one of the positive elements of that was Black people trying to produce their own learning environments, placing them in Black nationalist-oriented educational institutions throughout the United States. The demand by Black parents for alternative to white-controlled public schools and private schools far exceeds the ability of Black present independent institutional accommodation. The following hypotheses are suggested for consideration by those Black educators and parents who are involved in educational processes. These hypotheses are based on 10 years of extensive clinical investigation and research. So he also says that if a person wants to, gain access to his studies, his research on this topic, they can reach out to someone from. He's no longer in the land of the existing, but perhaps he could go. Perhaps there's a means to get this information still, if a person has the will to do so. So when he's speaking of how the schools fail to teach, fail to educate, he says that while schools pretend and claim that they treat each student as an individual learner and they'll meet students where they are, that actually is not the case. And if students are not meeting, first of all, they try to teach every student in the classroom with the same material, the same lessons, in the same exact manner, which is hypocritical to them saying they'll meet a student where they are if they're all having to learn the same curriculum and there's no individualized lessons for the students. He also says another incorrect aspect of just interacting with children in any kind of space, whether you're a teacher student or doctor student or is that we treat children, I should say, like they're adults. We use adult psychology to try to understand what is going on in that child's mind. He says here on page 23, the crucial role of early perceptual development in establishing the foundation for increasingly complex structure is well established. Many problems in learning are caused because educators, psychologists, etc. have generally attempted to interpret the child's actions and reactions in terms of adult psychology or in terms of normative stages of development. It is often ignored by those who follow the above theories that the child's actions and reactions are severely restricted because of his infinitely fewer experiences and diminished mental apparatus for processing these experiences. This means there are quantitative and qualitative differences between the child and the adult. Each new experience is not an independent entity, but becomes part of an integrated whole of the child's experience. In the normative stages of development theory, a child who does not perform at some arbitrary level at a certain age is viewed as an undeveloped child. This child is then given a negative level at a very early age, which sometimes determine his future life. Educationally and vocationally, educators have always articulated a need for understanding individual differences which exist in children and have then created programs for the group. Teachers also accept the fact that there are differences between children. They then attempt to teach them as if they were all alike. Needless to say, almost every educational program in existence fails to reach a certain percentage, or more correctly, fails to teach a certain percentage of children. So there's somewhere where he mentions the three different types of learning. Oh, here it is. Actually, right here. So the three different types of learning is reflective, perceptive, and concept. No, these are the three types of learning in my era. These are the stages of intellectual development: the reflective, the perceptive, and conceptual. And he states that he explains that. I'm not going to read everything he said. He explains that it is very beneficial for us to learn, especially when we're children, to be taught in a perceptual manner, and that is not the case in the K through 12 so-called educational system. That simply it just does not happen. Education as a whole has failed, and it's designed to fail Black people, because education should be defined as one's ability to exist in a constructive manner. And if you are subjected to the system of white supremacy, you are not existing in a constructive manner. So we are not educated. We are not being educated because white supremacists, the people who control and dictate what we learn in schools, are not interested in teaching us how to come from under their domination. They're not interested in teaching us how to be universal man or universal woman, which are people who practice and believe in justice, which is guaranteeing no one is allowed to be mistreated, and the people who need help the most receive constructive help. None of this is occurring in the school system, so none of us are being educated. We are just being housed until we are either able to be a slave that makes money for other white supremacists or racist suspects, aka white people, or we are thrown in greater confinement because our education has been so poor or so non-existent that we're easily bamboozled and taught to think that doing things that lead us to prison, greater confinement, is what we should be doing, instead of evolving into universal man and universal woman. So I'm gonna pause for there and let other folks share their notes. And I'm sure when folks begin sharing their notes, it may elicit me to, it may produce in me more thoughts to share. But other than that, I think I literally don't have one more thing to share, if that. But yeah, I'm gonna mute and let folks take over. I think yeah, that was a very awesome exchange of information between you all. As I said, well, as Quaker said, this is a very like short and concise chapter. I think what is very significant, what was said from the cohort, is that how school. I also have reading this and hearing from Irie, like hearing the comments that she's heard from other, not from other, but from suspected races, how they treat students like stupid adult people, little stupid adults or something of that manner. I would add that I think schools in general they function in the opposite, like we will like to think, as teaching children to actually retard us and just teach us. I literally encourage stupidity and promote stupidity. It may be a high, sometimes a very intellectual form of stupidity, like being really good at serving the system of white supremacy, like solving white people's problems. That may be a example of like intellectual stupidity. But all in all, it's in like when you understand what goes on in these classrooms and how like a lot of the classroom sizes are like 20 to 1 if you're lucky, 30 to 1, sometimes even 40 to 1, 40 students and one teacher. It's impossible to individualize a lesson, let alone you have a constructive environment of learning. And yes, teachers are just not given the tools to understand like a child's like maturity level, like not maturity as like the way we know it, but has their brain develop in the capacity that they are even ready and or able to learn the material. Right now, are they even able to learn this material in the manner that it is being taught? Likely not. But at the end of the day, like schools are not going to solve the problem of racism, white supremacy. They can be a tool that can help us to evolve into people who will solve the problem and replace the system of white supremacy with a system of justice. But they are definitely not a place we should have any sort of faith or trust, and that is certain. And as regards just to add to the conversation on perceptions, perception just being, I would just interpret that as just being able to understand how the things you're seeing connect and the logic behind them. Like if you see a person light a match and you see the flame come from the match, you understand that because they struck the match, fire came from that match. Are you able to put two and two together? Are you able to see the universal logic, how things operate on this particular planet? That's how I would perceive, and that's how I would interpret what this perceptual learning or intellectual ability is. That's just my 2 cents. Let me see. I had very little notes this week. Before we conclude with anyone else have any notes they didn't get to share, I'll give us a few seconds to unmute and share. If not, I'll close us out. I do believe that is everyone's notes and thoughts on this chapter. Thank you all for sharing constructive information with the cohort. Thanks to everyone who will find and give time to this video.